welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez Brothers trial transcript read through, and we are on the state's case, part 48. Dr. Roger McCarthy is still on the stand. He's quite obnoxious, if you ask me, my opinion. He's very evasive in his answers. He's giving Leslie Abramson, who is the defense attorney, one of the defense attorneys for Erik Menendez, he's giving her a very hard time, and it's painful to get through, but we're going to get through it. So let us get started. Please hit the like button and let's begin. So we are starting off Friday, November 17th, 1995. This is the beginning of the day. The court says, all right, everybody is here, and we will start with the trial and have the jury come out. The jury enters the courtroom, and the following proceedings were held. The court says, okay, everybody is here. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we are ready to resume with the trial. The witness is on the witness stand. Please state your name again for us. And he does so. This is Roger Lee McCarthy, mechanical engineer with forensic analysis. He created all the diagrams and he's speaking to the angles, the trajectory of the shots during the shooting. He's a mechanical engineer, not a biomechanical engineer, so he shouldn't be testifying to injuries, but he's doing that anyways. So, yeah, but he's also testifying to ballistics, which he's not an expert in. Like, none of this stuff he's an expert in, but he's testifying to it anyways, and the court's allowing it. And it's not right. But anyways, let's continue. All right. So continuing on, the court says, I will remind you you're still under oath. The witness says, yes. Yes, sir. The court says, and you may continue your cross-examination, he says to Leslie Abramson. She says, thank you, Your Honor. Roger Lee McCarthy, the witness on the stand at the time of the adjournment, so when we left for the day, is he's resumed his position on the stand and is testifying as follows. Ms. Abramson says, Dr. McCarthy, this morning, were you made aware of the fact that I had a meeting last night with the sheriff's ballistics expert, Deputy Van Horn? Someone told me someone told me this morning that you had been talking to Deputy Van Horn. I was unaware you had a meeting last night with him. And was it brought to your attention this morning areas with which his Deputy Van Horn's expertise disagrees with yours? It was brought to my attention that there were a couple of points of disagreement. I don't know that I could call it an expertise disagreement. Really? So he's just got to be like snotty and say shit like that, which really irks me. Like he's saying the deputy isn't an expert, even though, well, you don't know. And you're not an expert either, but okay, in ballistics. Ms. Amerson says, well, you understand that Deputy Van Horn is a firearms and ballistics expert for the LA County Sheriff's Department, and that's all he does for a living, do you not? He says, I guess I didn't have that understanding, but I knew he worked in the area at least some of the time. And do you know how many hundreds of cases he has qualified as an expert in ballistics and testified in? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. And have you never testified as an expert's ballistic? You have told us that, right? You have never. An objection asked and answered, overruled. The witness says, I don't recall being qualified specifically in ballistics. That is correct. And what were the couple of areas that you were told were in disagreement between yourself and Deputy Van Horn? Objection calls for hearsay. Sustained. Is it your intention on redirect examination to modify or change any of the statements you have made in order to avoid being contradicted by the Sheriff's Department? Objection, argumentative as phrased. Sustained. Is it your intention now that you are going to change any of your answers you gave concerning this reconstruction for the purpose of avoiding being contradicted by Deputy Van Horn? No. There was only one issue that gave me some concern, and that was talking about the Kennedy recreation. If I quoted a Kirkano caliber as a 9 millimeter, I was talking about my glycerin bullet and not the Kirkano. Kirkano, I have no idea if I'm saying that right. Sorry. So that's all you were told was in contention with your testimony that he says a Kirkano was not a 9 millimeter. I was told that he thinks a Kirkano is 7.5 millimeters, and it's not that either. It's 6.5 millimeters. That would be the only area. But a Kirkano is a small caliber military carbine. So that's it. That's all you were told? No, but that would be the only area if I made that error in terms of substituting. Word was not coming to me, sorry. In terms of substituting the caliber, if if I misspoke myself in terms of the caliber of the glycerin bullet. Kirkanos haven't been made for a while, but I wouldn't want the jury confused on the caliber of one if it's relevant to any of the considerations. And it's your understanding that not with respect to the Kennedy mock presentation that you did with the lawyers, but with respect to what you're presenting here in this case, this real case, you weren't told any areas that Deputy Van Horn disagrees with you. Is that right? Not disagrees with my reconstruction. I gather he was critical of me discussing closing the top of a shotgun shell with an overshot wad because that's an older technology, and he is correct there. He was critical of me discussing closing the top of the shotgun shell with an overshot wad. I have no idea what that means. Um, she says, how much older? Well, he says 30 years, and I am horrified to think that. Well, have you gotten over your horror to research whether or not 30 years is accurate? Objection, argumentative as phrased. Sustained. You disagree with that? It was represented to me that he claimed that such a closure hasn't been made in 30 years. However, it's so unrelated to my reconstruction, it wouldn't. I am not going to bother to research it. It's just every time you get a sign of your aging, it's just. Are you familiar with a book called Gunshot Injuries by Cornell Lewis, a Lagarde, United States Army Medical Corps? No, that title does not ring a bell. I may not have the complete title. Is Lagarde considered one of the leading and original researchers in the area of wound ballistics? That name is familiar. I am not so familiar that I could give you that verification, but I have heard that name. And since that name is in the literature, yes. And seen that name in the literature, yes. But you don't, in fact, refer to that name, Lagarde, as one of the standard tests that you had relied on in your gaining knowledge of ballistics at the pretrial hearing. Didn't you cite Lagarde and Damio? Is that the other one? I have a book by Lagarde. Your question wasn't that. He had written a book, but well, my question was, have you ever read anything about ballistics? The court says, let's not debate what the question was. Why don't you ask the next question? The question is, have you ever read the book by Lagarde? I have looked through it on occasion. It is not the text I use most often. I'm sorry. I now understand your question. I misunderstood. Well, did you ever read the introduction to the 1991 second revised edition of Lagarde's book? I don't think I have that recent of an edition. So you never read Dr. Fackler's introduction to that book. Ah, so one of the witnesses for the defense wrote the introduction. I don't have an edition of his book where Dr. Fackler wrote the introduction. That is correct. Do you believe, Dr. McCarthy, that it is a common misperception of laymen that bullets knock people backwards? Yes. And a common misperception that shotgun rounds knock people backwards? I think there is a common misperception of the degree of energy they have. Yes, I mean, they do knock you backwards, but not with the force that I think most people think they do. So they knock you down, is that what you're saying? No. They impulse in the direction of the impacts, but it's not nearly, I think the common perception is they hit a lot harder with a lot more force than they do. I mean, I haven't surveyed people, but my common perception of the misperception is that perception, if anything. Let me just restate that. My common perception of the misperception is that perception. This is the witness we're dealing with. I feel so bad for Ms. Abramson. She says, and as much as anything else. Objection, argumentative. The court says, okay, the comments of counsel are stricken as heard by the reporter. The Ms. Abramson says, do you know how many autopsies Dr. Golden did on the date he performed the autopsy of Mr. and Mrs. Menendez? He told me he did 800 that year, but I don't recollect how many he told me he did that day. Did you even ask him how many he did that day? I don't remember whether I did or not. So you don't know how many he did that day. That's correct. And you also don't know how much time he spent in the past 6 years examining and evaluating the photographs, the evidence, his notes, correct? That is true. I do not. You don't know how many hours he spent talking to his colleagues in the coroner's office, do you? I do not. How many coroners are there in the coroner's office in Los Angeles? I don't know. So you don't know how many colleagues with experience he has to consult with, is that right? He has or did, that is correct. Now, you testified yesterday that there was something in one of the photographs of the den that appeared to be tissue somewhere in the area near the foyer. Is that correct? I think I was a little more specific than that. Well, yesterday you weren't very specific. Objection, argumentative, motion to strike, sustained. Let me show you this large photograph, which is 299. You're referring to this particular photograph, are you not? Well, that's the one you had showed, the object I was referring to, so I used that. Yeah. And there is a piece of matter, shall we say, where the dark area is? Yeah, red tissue. Why don't you circle that? It's your drawing, you may. First, I have to get something with which to do it. Well, I want you to do it because I don't want to be accused of not circling what you had in mind. All right, this is not, he says, all right, this is not the best photograph. But I think what I showed you in the other better photograph was right here. She says, that's not working. He says, sorry, ma'am. Miss Abramson says, I had 10,000 of these at one point, Your Honor. I have slightly less now. Here's a red one, says the I'm sure they're looking for a pen or a marker or something. Ms. Amerson says, perfect. Why don't you circle it with a red one? And the witness indicates to the area. Ms. Abramson says, and you have photographs on computer, correct? Correct. You don't have hard copies of all of them, is that right? Um, Let me rephrase the question. Do you have a set of these photographs printed out? I don't recollect printing out. We may have. As I sit here, I don't recollect asking for a complete set to be printed out. And when you made your examination of these photographs, you did it on computer, didn't you? Yes. You didn't do it by just looking at photographs? Correct. And did you look at any of them through a stereo microscope? No. Did you did you have a way in your computer screen to split the screen and look at multiple photographs at the same time? I have software that does that. Yes. And did you do that? No. And with respect to that piece of material that you've circled, you don't have a hard copy available that enlarges this or any other photograph to show that material close enough to identify it. Isn't that true? I haven't got a printout. I could show it to you on the screen. Yeah, but we can't do that though. You don't have a printout. Is that right? Not with me. Like he has to enter it into evidence. He can't just do a printout. He can't just do like show it on the screen. He needs a printout in order to submit it into evidence or admit it. So he says not with me. And how many feet away from the exit wound? Let's get these out of the way. How many feet? I'll turn back to the exit wound, but how many feet away from the exit wound is that piece of material? Do you know? I haven't tried to lay it out exactly, but obviously you could go to the photographs and determine it pretty close. In looking at the photograph before we began this morning, you enlarged it on your small computer and we looked at it. Is that correct? Yes. And did we determine that this piece of material appears to be approximately 21 inches to the right or north of the midline of these two doors? I'm going to say on the order of 20 inches. Fine. So it's 20 inches north of the midline of the doors, approximately. And you don't know how many feet west of the couch? Well, it's a few feet, but I can't tell you precisely. And it's nowhere in your line of trajectory, and we're looking at it right now of shot B, 7B. Is that correct? It's not in the line. It's off to the side. So it doesn't even line up with the injury that he's saying it came from. And is it your opinion, Dr. McCarthy, based on your engineering experience, that that piece of tissue came from what you're calling shot 7 and no other? I can't positively tell you that. So you can't tell me that at all, can you? Well, I mean, I think it is perhaps more likely, but I can't tell you, as your answer was positively that it related to that shot. There are, according to you, 12 shots in that room, correct? Yes. 11 of which, according to you, hit human body. Yes. And some of them did, yes. Or some part of them did. And there are a number of wounds here that have both entries and exits, correct? Yes. And you can't identify what kind of tissue, if that thing is tissue, that is, can you? I cannot. And you cannot certainly, and you certainly can't say whose it is. That's correct. Now I'd like to get back to exhibit 3 or 4. First of all, I want to call your attention to the photo, either to the exhibit, the large exhibit that contains what you're calling shot 7B, which is it's very small, 263, or if it's easier for you to see, you can look at image E on 304. The angle that you have shown for the leg wound in that reconstruction is actually more extreme than the real angle of entry and exit, isn't it? It would depend on the exact rotation of the leg when the shot occurred, but I don't mean to show that as the precise angle of entry and exit. So all of his angles and things that he's showing in his diagrams, don't take them for what they are because it could be off. So why is he even here? What is the point of him testifying? It's true. Is it not? It's true, is it not, that the entry and exit with respect to this wound, based on Dr. Golden's report, is they're almost lined up. There is a very slight, maybe less than an inch lower position for the exit wound, the one on the outside. Is that right? I I guess as I sit here, I don't know, or I don't recollect him trying to be quite that precise, but you see the picture up top? That's at the murder scene, and I don't think when he did the autopsy he had that photo in the upper left-hand corner. Take a look at it. If you don't like my angle, move it a bit. Ms. Abramson says, it doesn't have to do with like or dislike, and I move to strike the answer as non-responsive. Sustained. Ms. Nahara says, excuse me, Your Honor, counsel is blocking me. Ms. Nahara says, you don't have x-ray vision? Ms. Nahara says, sorry, no. Court says, okay. Ms. Abramson says, so, is your answer, you don't know how much higher or lower these wounds are in relation to each other? He says, no. My answer is look at the picture in the upper left-hand corner. Look at my angle. That's what I placed it with. Could it be? I do know the leg was after the shot. The leg prior to the shot could have been touching the other leg, in which case the angle would be too high and lower would be correct. The remaining evidence doesn't permit that precision. If the angle were lower, apart from what position the leg was in, if the wounds are lined up in a certain way to where there is less of a height differential between the exit and entry, wouldn't that also require the angle to be lower? If they are almost parallel, the angle should be lower than what you've depicted, correct? Depends on the position of the leg as well. So he knows nothing, basically. All right, in some positions of the leg, if they're almost parallel, your angle has to be lower. Yes. And if the angle is lower, that means that you're rotating the vector line. As I am now demonstrating it on the illustration, the line at the top would actually come down, right? In that general direction, realizing that you're moving a vector, which is a three-dimensional thing, in a two-dimensional view. Exactly. It means that you put it into three-dimensional terms, the muzzle of the gun would be moving farther east, correct? In an easterly direction, and lower if we are going more horizontal. And by lower, the muzzle would be moving this way and lower down. Thank you. Now, in your scenario, Dr. McCarthy, Mr. Menendez is dead by shot two, correct? After shot two, yes. So, shot two is what kills him. Yes. And subsequent to that occurring, there are in your scenarios shots 3, 4, 5, and 6 before this leg wound is inflicted. Is that correct? In the numbering, I have postulated yes, with the understanding that, as I conceded to you earlier on, I can't, there is nothing to really pin this shot down relative to the other sequence. So, it could have happened at any time, is what you're saying, after 2. I wouldn't say at any time because there's some of the shots earlier in my sequence which are shot in this position. To deliver the shot, he would have been in danger of getting shot by the other shooter. So this area would be denied to the shooter in the various points, but there is nothing in the physical evidence that allows me to time this shot precisely relative to the other shots. Okay. What's happened to Mr. Menendez, however, before this shot, according to your sequencing, is shot number 1 has caused most of his other injuries. Shot number 2 has caused his head injury, and this is the only other shot that injures him, correct? This is the only other shot. Well, we talked about the stray pellets in the chest, but this is the only other serious shot, yes. Well, this is the only shot that you have illustrated. That's correct. Now, I have I pointed out to you yesterday the fact that there appears to be blood smearing inside Mr. Menendez's right thigh and appears to be blood smearing down his left leg in the knee area and the calf area. Is that what appears on the photograph? Yes. And you said yesterday that you believed that it was contact smearing with the two legs together. It looks inconsistent with that. It looks consistent with that. I am not going to say that that is the only explanation. And you are not suggesting that after Mr. Menendez was shot in the left leg, his two legs came together, are you? Well, let me break that up. He's dead when he gets this, according to you, correct? It's non-volitional movement. It's the elasticity of the couch and you could shoot the leg, and I postulate this is shot and then bounce back and hit the other leg, oscillate on the other cushions. This is what I am thinking about. I am not sure I can answer your question. In other words, it's possible you could hit the leg. I mean, I can't rule out the possibility. Blah, blah, blah. Sorry, my tongue is just not working today. I mean, I can't rule out the possibility that the shotgun blast that hits the leg squeezes it against the cushion on its left, bounces it back onto the other leg, and then bounces it back to its current position. I can't rule that out. So he's just thinking in nonsensical things and talking in word salad, as you can see. She says, This is the cushion to the left. Is that this? And she points to it. He says yes. The cushion that does not have one drop of blood on it? Objection assumes facts, not an evidence. Sustained. Did you find in examining the photographs that there was any evidence of blood of this area of the couch? Where you're pointing to now in the photographs, there doesn't appear to be any. I'd have to go back and look around the inside to answer the question more precisely. But you don't know, is what you're saying. I don't recollect as I sit here. That's true. And what you're saying is if the leg oscillated and then hit that cushion, that it's likely there would have been a blood transfer after the leg is shot, wouldn't it? I don't see that as necessary. Want what you postulate could happen, but I don't see it as necessary. Frankly, that's not part of my scenario. You're asking, is it a possibility? I can't rule it out. So he's saying blood wouldn't transfer if he was bloody onto the couch. That makes no sense. But he's saying no, that doesn't have to happen. What you're saying, that's not necessary. Okay, whatever, dude. All right. So Ms. Abramson says, but you believe it's possible that there is a transfer of blood to the inner thigh by having these legs touch together, even though there is no wound area on the left inner thigh to come in contact with the right inner thigh. Is that what you're saying? No, what I'm saying is it looks like the two thighs touched at one time, but after the shot to first of all, after the shot to his arms, there is no shortage of a source for blood in his leg areas. Secondly, after he is shot in the head, we have already discussed the catatonic movement, or for all I know, his legs were together at the time of that shot, and it's only this shot that separates his legs, but I can't tell you where it was. I mean, there is no shortage of blood in the leg areas, no shortage of areas of blood. There is no shortage of opportunities for the legs to touch and move apart. I don't know what it is. So there is no shortage of opportunities for repeat. Is that what you're saying? After he was shot through the arm, I don't postulate he is dead. But he is dead in the next shot, according to you. That's correct. He is shot in the shot. Okay. But there is no shortage of source of blood and he's hurt and at that point in time he's alive. So that like split second is how it happened, I guess. Well, did you examine to see if you could trace that smear that appears in the inner thigh to a source of blood? Is there a river connecting to his arms some way there? No, no, it's not flowing contact. I mean, shotguns and pellet entry and exits create spatters of blood. Wait, Dr. McCarthy, that's not a spatter, that's a smear. Eventually, where it ends up being moved, it finally ends up a smear. I can't tell you what it was before the legs touched together. Are you saying the legs touched together? Are you offering an opinion that based on science the legs touched together? No, ma'am, you are just saying whatever works for your theory. Is that true? Mr. Khan says, Your Honor, may the witness finish his answer. The court says, yes, the last question is stricken as not having given the witness a chance to give his answer to the previous question. The witness says, You asked me if his thigh blood indication was consistent with the smear from the two thighs being together. I readily conceded that it is. I was then merely going on to answer your question, assuming the hypothetical about the two thighs being together and discussing the various types and ways that could happen and the sources of the blood between them. Ms. Abramson asks, Dr. McCarthy, it was not my hypothetical that the two thighs touched. Yesterday, you specifically suggested that as the reason why there is blood on the inside of both thighs. Isn't that true? Only an answer to one of your questions. Well, then you're conceding on your original hypothesis. My hypothetical is that he was alive when he got the wound to the leg, that he was standing up when he received every wound but the head wound, that he fell back on the couch, leaning backwards, that because he had blood on both arms, he had his hands between his thighs, that that blood smeared on the inside of both thighs and that the proof of it was that he's got smeared blood down the left side of his arm and his hand. That's my hypothetical. Do you disagree with that? Mr. Khan says, objection. The witness says, yeah, I think it's impossible the shot through the left leg immediately fractures it into three pieces and he's down. Miss Abramson says, let me stop you. But it gets too complex. Mr. Khan says, Your Honor, may the witness finish his answer. The court says, well, you asked him a very long hypothetical and he is entitled to respond to it. The witness says, the leg doesn't bear the load. He's down. Now, you could postulate, well, while still alive, but badly injured in the arms and legs, someone placed him back up on the sofa to shoot him in the back of the head. What, sir? So now he's saying someone possibly placed him back on the sofa, like he fell to the ground because of the leg injury, and then someone placed him back on the sofa to shoot him in the head. That makes absolutely no sense. What? I got no words. I got nothing to say about that. That makes no sense. Um, he continues on, and like I'm lost for words. Sorry. He continues on saying, "I don't think it works that he takes this shot in this leg at all. Look at how seated naturally those legs are. I just find it very difficult to believe that as a result of taking the shot rather than falling down on the structurally lost leg, instead he elects to go and sit down gently." Okay, so now he's just speculating that he sat down gently. Well, who suggested sitting down gently, Dr. McCarthy? Look at the position, he says. Obviously, he sat down gently because look at the position he's sitting in. So it's not natural, I guess. Or it looks like he just sat down gently. He was either placed there to look that way or literally, um, he literally just sat down gently after being. That makes no sense. Okay, she says, yes. Look at his position. Look at his feet. You say that this is natural? The court says, counsel, let's stop, slow down, and stand up. Ms. Aronson says, I want to demonstrate something to the witness, if I may. The court says, then do it in a way that you're not arguing. Ms. Aronson says, are these, his feet seated in the final photograph, crossed in the way mine are? No. Crossed this way, and she demonstrates. He says, yes. On the edges of his feet. Yes. That's a natural position? The court says, is that a question? Miss Abramson says, yes. The court says, what's the question? Miss Abramson says, is that what you call a natural position? I rotate my feet sometimes that way, but I'm not going to say how many people do it. Are you using yourself as the only exemplar for your expertise? That's precisely why I answered the question the way I did. Well, this is not a natural position, is it? I don't think of myself as unnatural, but wow. Again, you're only using yourself when you are talking about a natural position for his feet. That's because that's how Roger McCarthy sits. Is that your reason? Well, I was immediately drawing on that from answering your question. I do not think of it as an unnatural position, if that's your question. Is it your testimony that if a person has a broken femur, they cannot stand up for any period of time? Is that your expert opinion? Oh, no. They could transfer weight to that other leg, obviously, and people can stand on one foot. And indeed, if I guess you could postulate he had his wits about him and took the weight off the leg that was shot off, and then used the other leg to maneuver himself in front of the couch and sit down as we see him now. And incidentally, when he was doing that, Your Honor, I think the witness is about to become non responsive. The court says, all right, ask your next question. Ms. Abramson says, thank you. Are you assuming that are you assuming that he had weight on that leg, the left leg, when it was shot in order to say maybe he could transfer his weight? Could you answer that yes or no? I'm not making a specific assumption about weight at the time. He just couldn't put any more weight on it after. So then you don't know if he had weight on it to begin with or transferred weight off of it. Is that right? Well, my view is this is not even a relevant discussion. Oh, okay. So you're going to decide what's relevant or not to her case to defend her clients. Got it. I don't think he had weight on either leg. He was seated, and that's why we see the straight geometry of the upper leg as we do now as a normally seated person. If that leg was shot while he was standing, he managed to seat himself in a way that this leg ended up pretty natural and pretty straight. That is, I think, unlikely. You indicated his legs moved after he was dead because of the shot. Only, I mean, his legs could have moved catatonically after the shot, but at my reconstruction, they're intact. So they move naturally, and the upper legs stay straight. They move naturally after he's shot. Is that what you said? Well, they move mechanically, correct. If he is moved catatonically after he is shot in the head, I mean, I guess you could say that's natural, but nevertheless, the leg is intact after he is shot in the head in my postulation. But once that upper leg is sheared by that shot, any movement is like those coroner's photos we see where the limbs are sort of very difficult to straighten out and get straight. That leg, that femur, is now broken in three pieces, but here, look how straight the upper leg is. Is that an answer or a question, Dr. McCarthy? I meant that as a question. Look at how straight the upper leg is, confirming the fact. I don't know what you're talking about. What leg is straight? Both legs are bent at the knees. Objection, argumentative, motion to strike, says Mr. Khan. The court says it is and is also compound. Ms. Abrams says you pointed to photograph A and you are indicating that the wound leg is straight, correct? Is that what you're saying? Yes, exactly. There is no structural bone between the hip and the knee now, but and you're assuming. Mr. Khan says, Your Honor, may the witness finish his answer. Court says, yes, finish the answer. The witness says, but the leg is sitting there in a reasonably natural position. It hasn't been misaligned. If he was standing and then sat down, I find it very unlikely he would be looking at some mispositioning of the knees vis-a-vis the knee or vis-a-vis the thigh because there is no structural straightness of that femur anymore. What the hell is he talking about? This is your medical expertise indicating that if he were standing at the time he were shot, by the time he sat down, the bones would have been so out of alignment it would have made his upper leg look crooked. Is that what you mean to say? Objection, argumentative, overruled. Finally. Is that what you meant? No. I would say just the opposite. For a person to be standing and then sit down with his sheared femur, and receive this straightness and naturalness of position strikes me as extremely unlikely. All right. Is that based on your engineering expertise or your common sense? What you would call common sense? I would say my engineering experience and my understanding of structures. Engineering is an area that's extremely dependent, is it not, on mathematical calculation? Some of engineering is, yes. What is the mathematical calculation of probabilities or possibilities that you are relying on to give you that previous answer? Oh, I don't think there is a rigorous characterization of the possibilities I could give you. So, is the answer you don't have one? I do not have a rigorous mathematical characterization that is true. Yesterday, I asked you a question about reasonable scientific certainty. Is that the concept that you have been relying upon in coming up with this scenario? Are you saying that the components of this scenario are, in your opinion, based on reasonable scientific certainty? The components where I testified I had pretty good evidence for, yes. Where I have merely placed things or assumed stuff, generally I've tried to be perhaps overly concerned about qualifying what you can take to the bank and what you should recognize are schematic as opposed to precise characterizations. Is pretty good evidence reasonable scientific certainty in your opinion, Dr. McCarthy? Good question. I certainly have used the term pretty good evidence, probably. Perhaps. It, well, I mean, I probably have used the phrase when I thought we had pretty good evidence. I mean, pretty solid. What I thought was a reasonable degree of scientific certainty on some point. So even if you're pretty good evidence, it's not Dr. Lawrence's pretty good evidence. Is that not true? Objection argumentative, sustained. So you're saying something is pretty good, and you will base your opinion on it even if Dr. Lawrence has said it's unlikely, though he couldn't say impossible. Isn't that true? Not just in and of itself. There would have to be some other compelling facts to make it pretty good evidence. No, what I'm asking you is you're saying some things here are pretty good evidence even though Dr. Lawrence thinks those things are unlikely, though not impossible. Objection assumes facts, not an evidence, and vague. The court says sustained. For example, the upper arm wounds that Dr. Lawrence thinks is unlikely to be associated with the elbow wounds, you still think that they're associated, correct? Objection asked and answered. Overruled. The witness says, I do. Now, do you concede, Dr. McCarthy, that there is no evidence on the rug along the line of your trajectory to indicate that 27 pellets of number 4 buckshot passed through a leg there? There is no evidence of a strike that I can there is no evidence of a strike that I can see in the remaining photographs of 27 pellets in the line which I have diagrammed. And there is no evidence that you can point to of splattered blood or tissue anywhere in that area near your trajectory line. Isn't that true? In the area you pointed, there is nothing I can identify from the remaining photographs of the type you have asked me about. That is correct. She's getting him to admit all the things. This is great. Now, let me ask you about what appears in photograph F and photograph. I'll get as much out of you this way as I can. H on 304. Do you see round dark areas as I am pointing to them in these two photographs? Not concurring with all of your points, I concur with some of them. Do you see this area here that I am circling? Yes. Do you see what appears to be roundish dark spots in that area? As I sit here, I do not, but that does not make you incorrect. So you have looked at this. How about here? Do you see them in this one? Same spots here? I think there are some spots in that area, yes, but not from your photographs, from my manipulation of them, he says. And do you see that there are spots here outside the actual pool, which appears to be a pool dripping from the side of Mr. Menendez's left leg? Yes. Outside that pool, there are also round spots, correct? I would say next to it. I am not sure what you mean. Well, they are where they are. His answers like that drive me nuts. It is what it is, basically. And those are right below the leg, the ones that we just looked at, the round spot. Well, strike that. The pool is right below the left leg, correct? Generally, yes. I am comfortable with right below, but it's generally below the leg, yes. Oh, he says I'm uncomfortable with the word below. God damn it, I hate him. And even in that area, right below the leg, there is no tissue or pellets of any kind. Isn't that true? You know, I would have to go back and re examine the patch to say there was no tissue in it, but I don't recollect seeing any pellets. I want to change the subject for a moment and go back to ammunition. You brought to court some live rounds that are in the custody of the deputy sheriff. Express brought them to the court, some live rounds, yes, that are in the custody of the sheriff. Okay, the shotgun, Your Honor. You do not have the shotgun up there with you now? No. And I don't want you to. I would, however, like to approach the witness and have the deputy put the live rounds up there. The court says, all right. Abramson says this is a box of Fiachi, and it reads that it has 10 cartouches. I have no idea how you pronounce that, but it looks like you would say cartouches. But I like it, but I take it that's not English. Is that correct? My assumption has always been it's Italian, but I don't read Italian. I don't think the side is Italian. Cartucci da Caccie? I have no idea. I don't speak Italian. But we won't, sorry, but we won't make the reporter do that. This looks a little more like French. Cartouches de chasse. I have no idea, however they're pronouncing it. But, however, they're cartridges, right? To me, yes. So that's whatever that word is. The cartouches means cartridges. And these have little copper balls in them. Yes. And is it your understanding that the pellets in this case were copper colored? Oh no, as I told you, these are what's called plated shot. Did you tell us that the other day that these are plated? Yes. When you asked me about it, didn't I assume that the shot I was shooting was that involved in the incident? I said, of course not. My shot was plated. No, you said yours has a shot cup inside and it doesn't, does it? The record will indicate also mentioning a plate. I mean, this is a state-of-the-art shotgun shell. So he's saying mine are better than the ones that were used in the actual homicide. Even though you're the one, testing this stuff about the homicide scene, so why wouldn't you use the same exact shell instead of these plated ones that are just state of the art, but whatever. And did you think you could put it in a time machine and shoot it back to 1989 and make it available to your clients? Objection, argumentative, sustained. Good point, because she's using the wrong ones. She made her point. Ms. Abramson says, now, and you knew the minute you bought this, this was not the ammunition used in this case. Is that what you're saying? No, I knew it when I suspected the crime scene evidence. Or when I inspected. God, I cannot talk. No, I knew when I inspected the crime scene evidence. So you bought this first? Oh, yeah. That's why I had it. That's why I had a case of it. So you bought this first, and then you inspected the crime scene evidence that didn't have plated shot and didn't have a shot cup holding number 4 rounds, and then you did your test firing. Is that right? Yes, I started test firing with this. After you already knew this wasn't the right ammunition? Oh, yeah. Do you have a knife with you? Surely. Now, these shells have a star crimped top, correct? Yes. And that's what that's called. Star crimped? I'm not sure. So he doesn't even know. So you don't know that term? I'm not sure that's all it's called, but I use the term for this type of closure, yes. Did you use that term in your direct testimony? I don't know whether I used star crimped, but crimped or folded. And there is no wad beneath the crimping and above the pellets. Typically not in a crimped shot. Where would you like me to cut this? Before you cut anything, I would like to ask you another question. Are these pellets the same diameter as the non-coated type, the non-plated type? I think so. They're very close. Do you know? I can't remember if I mic'd them up or not. Okay, so you don't know, right? Or you don't know right now? They're very close, but I can't remember if they're precisely. I think they are, though. And do shot shells come let's just make one thing clear. This is a 12 gauge shell. Correct. And that has to do with the width of the barrel, correct? The diameter, yes. The diameter of the barrel. And you can put a larger one of these, a different gauge that's larger, like a 16 gauge or is that the other one, 16 is smaller. So you can't put like a 10 gauge shot in a 12 gauge shotgun, correct? That's correct. But you can put a magnum or stock shell in a 12 gauge. Okay, we're talking about a 12 gauge though. The diameter can't be any bigger than this or it won't go in the gun. Correct. And if it's smaller than this, it won't fire properly either, will it? If it is significantly smaller, it won't stay in the barrel. It will just fly right out. However, not all shot shells for 12 gauges are exactly this length. Correct. And you can get longer ones or shorter ones. I don't mean shorter than this. Some are longer, some are shorter. This is 2 3/4, and you can get 3, and I think you can perhaps get longer than 3. But 3 is a common length. And certain rounds of shotgun ammunition comes in those varying lengths. Yes, mainly birdshot, wouldn't you agree? Birdshot can be available in 3. I guess I understand your question to mean only some and not all. I don't think slugs are available in longer ammunition. As long as they say that, you'll bring out a 3-inch slug, but I'm I'm not sure that all ammunition isn't available in a 3-inch magnum. All right. So, are you saying that you could buy a number 4 buck that is bigger than this? As I sit here, I don't recollect seeing it. So you don't know, or you think not, or do you think yes? I don't have an opinion. All right. Would you open one of these? Sure. When you're firing plated rounds like that, do they make a different kind of hole than the unplated kinds? Not materially. In a paper target, they make a cleaner hole. You're cutting the crimping off? Yes. I am just indicating for the record what you're doing. I stopped. I thought perhaps you had a preference. No, I want you to do it the way you can do it. Promise you won't put your fingers down there yet. What? I just don't want I don't want the pellets to run away. Yeah, if we lose one, it's going to go down under this. Miss Abramson says, could you get an envelope? I want to get to what's inside, so I want to get them out. The witness says, okay. Abramson says, okay, would you like me to leave this star on this like I have it, or would you like it cut off? No, don't cut off anything. Okay, okay. Now, inside, when you have taken out the 27 pellets, have you not? Now, now you have the shot cup, he says. Would you remove the cup? And you're tapping at it to remove something from the base. What is it that's in the base? Gunpowder. Let's take the gunpowder out too while we're at it and put it in that. We've got a napkin, and this is gunpowder. And that's gunpowder. And that isn't the filler granules that you had taken about in your direct testimony, or that you talked about in your direct testimony. That's correct. That's a different type of shotgun shell design altogether. And to your knowledge, does Fiachi make a shot shell that had that kind of filler granules in it? I don't have any knowledge what they've done to answer your question. Then you don't know. Bear with me just 1 second, he says. Sure, you always want to clean this stuff out, right? Okay, I'm just making a crimped up bundle out of this. The court says, why don't you give it to the bailiff then? Ms. Amerson says, I'm going to put it in the envelope. The court says, give it to the bailiff. Ms. Amerson says, well, I would like to keep it. We will put it in another envelope. The court says he's taken care of it. Ms. Amerson says, all right, now, this shot cup is what was inside this number 4, and you do recognize that the number 4 ammunition that was used here did not contain such a device. Yes. And is the purpose, to the best of your knowledge, as a user of the shotgun ammunition, is the purpose of loading the pellets in the cup in order to keep them together more when they come out of the muzzle of the gun? He says it performs that function, but I believe the primary purpose of the cup is to protect the shot from the barrel and also to facilitate the shot absorption by the shock absorber, the little plastic oval that you see there. The impulse of the powder can now be smoothed out against the shot, so it's less likely to deform the shot by hitting it in the base. All right, I paused for a second. I needed to do something, and now I don't remember where I left off. So if I'm repeating this question, I'm sorry. Uh, she asks, that shot is also what you're referring to in that form and the individual form as the power piston. No, below the shock absorber is the power piston. I'm sorry, I misspoke. You're right. The result of that, however, is you get more tightly packed rounds coming out of the muzzle, correct? Tighter patterns? Tighter patterns and also more consistent patterns because this represents state-of-the-art shotgun shell design because the shot is plated, which protects it, makes it slide out of the barrel easier. The shot is protected by a shot cup, which is of the discarding bow variety. May I break this, Leslie, or is it going to bother you if I do it? It's non-responsive, but I will let you do it with the next question. And this cup protects the shot coming out, protects the shot, and also seals against the barrel by giving you the maximum benefit of the powder energy. Fine. However, if ammunition provided in that shot cup tends to keep a tighter pattern than ammunition that's packed the way the ammunition in this case was packed, yes, and you knew it was going to produce tighter patterns when you started to do your distance shooting, tighter and more consistent patterns, yes. Now, it didn't produce consistent patterns, you told us, but they were tighter and more consistent than the other ammunition would have been. Well, how do you know? Because you didn't test that. Well, you're speculating on what the other ammunition would have done, Mr. or Dr. McCarthy. You didn't shoot the other ammunition, right? No. But I shot some Winchester next to it, which were those other targets, and there is no question that this is a better shotgun shell design. But you shot Winchester, and that Winchester that you shot didn't that have, in fact, that granulating space you were talking about? It did. So you shot a Winchester round with granulated spacing material when you had no reason to believe that any round used in this case had granulating spacing material. Isn't that correct? That is correct. And yet you are, well, strike that. And you are projecting off of what you saw in the Winchester rounds to make certain assumptions about what the matter would have been and the type of ammunition actually used here. No, not project off of it. I would have presumed before I shot them what would happen, and indeed it did. The granulated powder is in amongst the shot to protect it. It is still a superior design to the unprotected shot. So the Winchester shell, even without loose shot, without a cup, is still protecting the shot better. The better you protect the shot, the more uniform the shot comes out of the barrel, and the better, more consistent patterns you get. So even the Winchester gave more consistent patterns than you would have expected with the ammunition here. That's what you're saying? Yes. Have you seen the test firings that have been done with the actual ammunition here? No, I have not. Now, is it your opinion, Dr. McCarthy, that you can take test fire patterns? Let's assume you have the identical model gun. Let's say you have the next serial number. Okay. Either before or after. Okay. I'm not sure that would make it any closer dimensionally, but I understand what you mean. And let's say you have the identical ammunition, let's say from the same run of the lead pig. What, of the lead pig? I don't know what that means. Do you know what I mean by that? Yes, but that's not what you mean to say. What you mean to say is the same lot, the same case, the same production run, the same box. Okay? Well, the box only holds 10, but I understand. So you have 5 from the same box. Okay? as was used in a particular event. Okay, okay. But you have a different gun. Yes. All right. And in your opinion, if you did test firings with that different gun with the same ammunition, could you then take the patterns that were fired in that test firing and use those definitively to measure wound patterns in the incident? Maybe. Maybe? If they were close and consistent enough, let me put it this way, you could use that information to make a defensible estimate of distances. In other words, I am not sure someone wouldn't yell at you, but wouldn't yell at you, but you still would have a reasonable basis to hypothesize that certain shots went a certain distance range. I mean, I don't think necessarily you could do it in 5 unless they were just very, very consistent. Then maybe I would be comfortable with 5. But if you did, 10 or 15 and they were really consistent. I mean, how is 5 giving you any kind of like real um data to work with? Wouldn't you do like a lot of firings to get a testing done? I would. I wouldn't think 5 would be enough, but he's saying you could do it in maybe 5 or 10, 15. All right, so with each other, you mean if they were really consistent with each other? Really consistent with each other, shot to shot, especially in this sort of weapon, which is basically a standard cylinder bore, doesn't depend on exactly how the choke was made or something. I would. I am not comfortable with the word definitively, but I think you would come up with evidence that you would have to give some weight to, and you certainly could defend as a basis statements. It would just depend on the consistency. I just want to point out that he throws in things like a standard cylinder bore and the choke, and he uses lots of like big fancy words and terms that make him sound all experty, but he doesn't explain them. The jury's going to be confused about what he's talking about, and he doesn't dumb it down for them, and he doesn't explain what he means, and I really feel like it's just word salad, trying to throw a bunch of big fancy words at the jury to make them think that he's experty when he's not. So, next question. She says, you would be willing to do that? Is that what you're saying? I would be willing to do what I just described. I am not sure what you mean by that. That's what I mean. You would be willing to make this kind of statement about possibilities, probabilities, I think you said, if you had shot the same ammunition with the same type of gun and gotten consistent patterns, correct? I would be willing to say about the patterns what the evidence allowed me to say about the pattern. Like I say, I am comfortable with definitively, but I'm uncomfortable with the word definitively, but at the same time, that information is not of zero value. I didn't ask you if it was of zero value. I am asking if you, as testifying as an expert witness, would take that information from singular guns, same ammunition, or similar guns, same ammunition, even test firing, and use it as the basis to make some estimates or decisions about distance in the incident. That's what I'm asking you. I think with one more little piece of work, yes, there would be just one more step. If you now take that ammunition, you got good consistent results of the same gun. If you then, and my plan here would have been, we are talking about a similar gun. You don't have the gun. We don't have the gun. We just have the serial number, the next serial number. So it would have been like made probably right after that one in the lot. Now I take one or two more, which was my plan here, of cylinder bore 18 and a half inch barrel weapons, and you shoot them and you get good consistent groups, consistent with the first weapon, consistent with each other, that is, and you demonstrate that it's sort of round around independent and weapon to weapon independent because here you are shooting them out of one gun. You have to project them to the other gun, I think, to test how much it varies gun to gun. So, if you do now, the uh, next three is the same. If you do know the next three in the same series and they all shoot pretty consistently, then within the degree of consistency, I would be willing to opine that it was to the degree we had measured gun dependent or independent. talking about? Sorry for the swearing. I'm just like, he's so confusing. And to the degree we had measured distant independent. What? I have no idea what he just said. But you didn't attempt to get 3 guns with which to do this rigorous experiment you have just told us about, did you? Oh, I've got 3. It's just 3 of these guns? No, the point is you have to demonstrate gun independence. So I was going to use, in fact, have you got the targets? I think you will see I used Dr. McCarthy. Can you answer the question and not ask a question? Okay. My recollection is I shot those targets with 2 different weapons. There is 2 different shotgun serial numbers on them. And then you got no consistency? Well, I didn't get enough consistency to make a defensible estimate, but no consistency is too strong. And you never shot it with the right ammunition, correct? I didn't shoot it with the ammunition as was used in the murder. That is correct. Now you're not to use the word murder, Dr. McCarthy. That's for the jury to decide. Objection. The court says, let's take a recess now and resume at 1:45. So the recess is taken. He didn't say anything about that, I guess. Um, yeah, he didn't say anything about her saying you can't say that they were murdered because the jury's to decide that. But I guess that was his way of dealing with it. Let's just take a break. So, that was fine. They took a break, and we will continue tomorrow with the rest, or continue on with his testimony. He's going to be on the stand for probably like 2, 3 more episodes if I can squeeze it into 3, maybe. We will see. He's almost done. I promise you that. And I mean, it's interesting. It's fun. I love hearing Leslie basically demolish him. He's so difficult, but then she finally gets him to admit to a lot of the things that she's trying to drag out of him that would have been just easier if he did admit in the first place. But he's not doing that because he's a hired gun. As you can see, this is what hired guns are. As you could see in the Karen Reed case, Judd Welcher, the Aperture guys, Judd Welcher and I can't remember. Oh man, Shannon Burgess. They were hired guns and they basically testified to whatever the state wanted. And that's what I feel like this guy is doing as well. And then now that he's done so and he's on cross, he can't defend the things that he has been trying to defend, his theories, because they just don't hold water. So anyways, that's kind of my take on it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I appreciate you guys for watching. I know this is kind of a brutal one. It's gonna get better when we get to the defense's case. I guarantee it because there's just more interesting stuff to get to. But we got to get through this, and we will do so. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.